I did not plan on reviewing this ship. I did not want to review this ship. There are a bunch of creators out there that have already reviewed this ship, and I didn't think I needed to. But I did anyways, unfortunately. Welcome back to Forge Gaming. I'm your host Phoenix, and this is my review of the MISC Fortune. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the fact that my publication schedule has slowed down quite a bit recently. I apologize, and it's going to pick back up, but I just finished a huge work project that kind of took a toll on me, and I needed just a little bit of recovery time before I got back into the swing of things. I'm also in the process of selling my house, so I've been doing home repair projects on the weekends, and I'm a bit tired. With that said, I appreciate all you guys that have subscribed, and ask that any of you that aren't already subscribed, please consider doing so. It really does help the channel a lot and would be greatly appreciated. But without further delay, let's get into it. Now, part of the reason I didn't want to review this ship is because, frankly, it seemed underwhelming based on the performance metrics that were leaked just a couple of weeks ago. But I figured I could at least give it a shot at the off chance that it could surprise me with the convenience factor, given that the MISC Fortune comes with a handy little parlor trick of processing and organizing its RMC cargo pretty much all on its own, thus potentially saving you, the owner-operator, boatloads of downtime, therefore allowing you to spend more time scraping and less time stacking. At least that's how CIG pitches it to us on the RSI website. Spoiler alert, this is more of a novelty than a real boon to productivity, but we'll touch more on that later. Now, some of you fine folks have asked that I do more ship tours, as traditionally, I've kind of focused more on performance than on layout, but I think that's a fair ask, so let's go ahead and do that. Starting from the outside, right off the bow, we have a size 1 salvage arm attachment bearing the size 1 baler salvage head with the cinch scraper module and ready grip tractor module. Now this is pretty much an equivalent loadout to just one of the Vulture salvage arms, which most of us were likely aware of prior to the launch of the Fortune thanks to some Evocati leaks and early updates on Urkel. Also on the front of the ship are two size 1 CF117 Bulldog laser repeaters, giving the Fortune a less than impressive 234 DPS. But we're not passing any judgment on its combat prowess, as this is certifiably not a combat vessel. This is intended for salvage and salvage only. Conveniently located just aft of the guns is an access ladder and door that takes you up and into the ship just behind the flight deck. Moving further aft, we find ourselves in front of the portside conveyor system and RMC hopper, or dispenser, whichever you prefer. Now, this is the primary draw of the Fortune because rather than its Vulture counterpart, where you have to spend 2 to 3 minutes unloading your RMC by hand every time you fill up your buffer, with just the push of a button, the Fortune automatically boxes up, dispenses, and organizes your valuable cargo. Moving on, we see one of 4 large VTOL thrusters with the 2 in the rear aiding the 2 in the front that supposedly will afford the Fortune with higher than average atmospheric maneuverability, which may be handy when salvaging planetside wrecks. At the rear of the ship, we can call down an elevator as an alternate entry point. Just a note, the elevator also serves as an additional cargo grid, allowing you to store up to 4 SCU of cargo securely on the ship's grid. Moving forward through the ship, we have various component compartments that all seem to be functioning correctly, which is nice. And we also have a viewport or window, both port and starboard, that gives you a spectacular look at the back of your cargo boxes. Just forward of the windows on either side is a control panel that allows you to either craft or dispense RMC. And just forward of that is another door leading us to our habitation area with component storage on the port side. Underneath said component storage is a small gun rack for sidearms or multi-tools. Unfortunately, these are the only gun racks on the ship, thus reinforcing the idea that this ship is for business only, no shenanigans. Personally, I would have liked to see a long gun storage locker, given that in the future you won't be able to holster a long gun while flying, and should you be under the duress of a pirate attack and or boarding, you'd be left without a long gun to properly defend yourself. Slightly forward of the gun rack is the ship's sole fuse panel, which is conveniently right behind the cockpit, which makes for easy access should you need to replace it on the fly. On the starboard side of the ship, we have the head or bathroom, complete with a toilet, a sink, and a shower head that sits directly over the toilet, which itself does not retract or stow away. This shower is for sitting only, friends, which I suppose could be a really efficient setup if you had some paperwork to do, but also had to get cleaned up for a hot date with that homeless lady you found working the recycled water booth at Checkmate. Just outside of the sitting shower is a water maker, which is suspiciously positioned next to the toilet and shower, which I'm just not realizing. Take from that what you will. Moving a hair back towards the rear of the ship is a cozy little bed for sleeping and or bed logging, underneath which is a conveniently placed storage bin allowing you to store up to 900,000 micro SCU. So I guess this is where you would store your long guns. I just wish there would have been a gun rack. Right, moving on to the cockpit, we are greeted with one of the best views available to MISC ships, which is, of course, identical to the Prospector cockpit, but worlds better than any other MISC cockpit. Which kind of makes me angry that ships like the Freelancer and Starlancer don't have this setup, because per the lore, this glass, quote unquote, using cockpits is as strong, if not stronger, than structural steel. So there's literally no drawback to having it in lieu of the mailbox window slit. Gotta hand it to whoever placed the MFDs here as well. Tell them to talk to the boys down in Mirai and let them know that you can have mounted holographic MFDs that don't fully monopolize 20% of your visual real estate, just in case they need to hear it. Right, so as far as layout goes, I have minimal complaints about the MISC Fortune. It's a one-man ship with, I think, a pretty smart layout. There's mostly everything you need, though I think they could have stacked a food maker above or below the water maker to make it a feature-complete ship. And I think those viewports behind the external cargo grid are pretty much useless for anything other than to say you have windows. With that said, let's turn our attention to performance. And to do that, I think it's fair that we pit it against the Vulture. Because, let's be honest, both these ships are priced at $175, which I believe is highway robbery for the Fortune. Both are single-seater salvage ships, and both have similar amenities. With that said, we do start to see some divergence after that. Just for the heck of it, we will note that both ships have effectively the same combat metrics when it comes to shield HP and DPS. Though the stock configuration gives the slight edge to the Fortune due to it having one less cooler, thus less energy requirements for coolers, consequently more energy available for shields, which means the Fortune has a higher shield recharge rate. It's more hull HP than the Vulture by about 20,000, but remember guys and gals, hull HP really only matters for critical components, the breakdown of which I don't know. There's a site you can use that shows that breakdown. I just can't remember it off the top. Drop a comment if you know the site that has that breakdown. Anyways, moving on, the Vulture more than makes up for it in other areas, namely speed and maneuverability. If we look at the SEM speed of the Fortune, topping out at 143 meters per second, which is 2 meters per second slower than the Polaris, which is mind-blowing to me, while the Vulture tops out at 200 meters per second. This doesn't seem like a giant issue, but I found myself switching to nav mode in the Fortune while looking for panels, just because I felt like I was practically crawling through the asteroid fields, which is an issue I've never had when using the Vulture in the past. When it comes to pitch yaw and roll between the Fortune and the Vulture, we have 32, 75 degrees per second, and 55, 125 meters per second respectively, which is massive. Perhaps when flying gets more fleshed out, the VTOL thruster configuration of the Fortune will give it a slight edge, but at this point in time, the Fortune is just lacking in this department. The Fortune does, however, have a much larger quantum fuel capacity than the Vulture at 1.8 SCU as opposed to 1.1 SCU, which I suppose could be an issue for the Vulture if you're doing extended RMC runs with a cargo hauler in tow. For instance, the Fortune will be able to just go longer, which would be necessary because it salvages at literally half the speed, which maybe doesn't sound like an issue, but it is. And this is where we have to get honest about the MISC Fortune. I used the Fortune for 3.5 hours before I decided I would never use this ship again. Everything is just slow. You move slow, you scrape slow, you load boxes into the rear of the ship slow. It's just slow. And I get it. The salvage game isn't necessarily high-octane gameplay, but let's get real. Who is this for? Besides layout and aesthetics, I cannot for the life of me think of a good reason why you would choose this over the Vulture. And that's saying something coming from me, because I'm a MISC guy. I like MISC ships for reasons that I can't fully articulate. I choose ships like the Starlancer over ships like the Constellation series every single day. It's primarily for the modern layouts, the vibes, and the aesthetics, because the Connie series objectively outperforms my Starlancer in almost every way. The Starlancer is just good enough to where I just don't care. And that's not the case with the MISC Fortune. Now I get it, we can't have two ships at the same price point doing the same thing at the same rate. We also need to avoid power creep as new ships come out that would render older models useless, because then there would be best in slot for everything, and that best in slot would change with every new wave of ships. Does that mean we have to make a new ship objectively worse than older models? What's the opposite of power creep? I mean, even if that's true, then lower the price point. Why is this $175? Make this a more logical step for people that don't want to spend nearly $200 to get into salvage gameplay. Bring it down to Cuddy Black prices, and I think we could have a conversation. But, and this is just my opinion, I think $175 is absurd. Because let's just face the facts. What percentage of your time in a salvage loop is spent sorting boxes in a vulture? 5 to 7 minutes? So in an hour you're spending, 10 to 14 minutes sorting boxes? Probably closer to 10? And okay, so let's say we save those 10 to 14 minutes and we use the Fortune. The issue is you can only carry 28 SEU as opposed to the 36 to 40 SEU in the Vulture. Now I've seen the Reddit post about people squeezing in anywhere from 33 to 40 SEU of boxes into a Fortune. How long did that take? I can guarantee it took more than 10 minutes. Those hallways are just too thin. Plus the process of leaving your ship, removing the boxes from the sides of the ship, moving them back to the elevator, and loading them 4 at a time into the cargo area. I can promise you, it isn't breakneck speeds here. We're not setting any records for hourly productivity. With that said, my opinions only reflect the current state of the game. Word is going around the rumor mill that different salvage materials will be available in the future, and that you'll be able to sort different materials by type into different boxes. Maybe the Fortune will have an advantage regarding how that functions. Like maybe the hopper or buffer will be split and capable of more readily dividing types of salvage material. But if that's the case, then they should give us some insight about that now rather than later. Unfortunately, I think the creative directors at CIG are still living in the blue sky stage of planning, which they should have realistically left like 10 years ago. So I doubt that they've actually thoroughly theory crafted that out. Now, some redemption for the Fortune, as I insist on not ending on a negative note. The MISC Fortune is small, it's prospector size. Rather, it's 16.5 meters or 11 kiddie pools wide, and only 26.5 meters or 120 bowling balls long, meaning you can carry 2 of these, or 1 in a prospector, or 1 in a light or medium fighter, inside the hangar of a Polaris. So if your plan or goal is to travel in one of those configurations, then yeah, this is the salvager for you. Also, some folks like to play this game as scavengers, meaning they go around collecting pieces off of broken or abandoned ships, they bring them back to their home point, and they use those components on their ships. It's valid, and it actually sounds kind of fun. Well, with the Fortune, you can kinda do that gameplay loop a little bit faster, given the fact that the majority of its cargo grid is on the outside of the ship. It enables you to grab small components and slap them right on the outside rather than bringing them around the back of the ship and storing them inside. The only drawback to this is that it seems really limited on what size of components or ship weapons will actually fit on the grid, so there's that to consider. But if you're only going after other small ships, then this might be a viable scavenger vessel. And finally, I'll admit, the aesthetics of the ship far surpass those of the Drake Vulture, but that's just my opinion. I know that Drake fits the aesthetic preference of a lot of players. Clean your room, you little freaks. I know it seems like I was kinda harsh on the Fortune, and that's because I kinda was. But I think we should be. We can't be heard if we don't make noise, and if the Crusader Intrepid and RSI Galaxy debacle shows us anything, CIG does listen to us sometimes. At least I think they do. I don't think it's too late to make some changes to this ship, including the price point that it's currently at. If I were working in their PR office, I'd roll the price back to a more appropriate number. Credit every account that already purchased one with some store credit and an in-game account bound gift like a set of armor. Win back some goodwill, since you already got the money. But in the end, that's just my 2 cents. And now that you have it, let me know your thoughts on the MISC Fortune. I'd love to hear from you. Also, I'd like to ask again that you consider leaving this video a like and subscribe if you enjoy Star Citizen content. I'm looking forward to how this year goes for the channel. We're just getting started and have no intention of stopping. As always, Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the verse.